Today's video, I wanted to go through simple postures that you can do for your spine on hands and knees that don't actually use your hands. And so those of you that are feeling a lot of strain in your wrists, a lot of tension in your hands, that have a really hard time just being in table pose, this video is for you. It's really to take the pressure off of the wrist, but to still receive all the benefits of being in table pose and doing cat cows. And so come onto your mat. And you're going to have props here. And so, props really allow us to get out of the places where we go too heavy. And so when we're in table pose and we're feeling a lot of tension in our wrist, right? I know that it's happening in all back parts of the body. So the heel of the wrist, the heels of the feet, the tailbone, it's probably from sitting back all the time. And so it's just very common in our culture, and it's very common to really be heavy in these places. And so one of the biggest ways to shift out of it is to shift your weight forward, right? To shift your weight forward on the balls of the feet, on the knuckles of the hand. If that makes it even harder to be in table pose and you still want to do your cat cows and your circles, then I really recommend using some blocks. And now the blocks aren't here for you to fall into. This is just going to make issues worse, right? You're not aligning your shoulders. The blocks are really just working on giving you the height that you need without being on your hands. So I always think that you want to always be pressing into the blocks. And if you have them with your forearms, you want to still measure them shoulder distance. And so when we measure our hands shoulder distance, again, if you haven't done my videos, I'm going to go through it, but it's when we turn our middle fingers into touch. And what this does is it places the shoulders right above the wrists. From the thumb mound pressing down, that's where you turn your hand out from, not the thumb mound. And so this places the hands shoulder distance. So you still want to work with shoulder distance so that your arm bones are in the right place in this posture. So you're still going to measure yourself out. And that might just mean turning your middle fingers into touch and eyeballing where your elbows are. If it is impossible to do that, then definitely come down onto your knees, and you can take your hands the other way so that they're not so in such an extension, and then just place your hands down. And wherever the thumb mounds are, that is where you're going to place, right, your blocks. And so when you've got that, you're going to find the right height of your blocks. You want them to emulate the height of your arm bone. So whether you use one block, whether you use blocks on top like this, you're going to have to figure that out for yourself. And so when you're here, interlace the hands together and press all four corners of the palm together. And that way your hands are still working on alignment. And so that means that all four corners of the hands are pressing. You're not open in any place. And so look at your hands, make sure that they're lined up. And then from here, press into the block so that your shoulder blade is still connected to your rib cage. The moment we drop down into our shoulders, the shoulders drop, we're dropping into our arm bones, we lose the contact of the shoulder blade and the rib cage, which stresses out the shoulder. And so you still want to work on shoulder alignment here. Now, when you're here, you can inhale and open your front up and exhale and curl and round. And now you can get all the benefits of being in a table pose, of really freeing your spine, of being able to go back and forth like this. And so it's really good too, right? When we go back and forth, to also create circles. And then you can work on creating your circles here. And so there doesn't need to be anything in your way, right? If your hands are hurting, you can do a lot of postures with your elbows on the blocks. And so when you're going in circles, make sure you go both ways. The circles are really great for the kidneys. When we feel like our bones start to dry out, we know our kidneys need more support. And so your kidneys are your waters, right? It's your ancestral stock. When our kidneys start to dry out, it's like all the waters are coming out of our bones. And so when you want to put more water in the body, you need to make these like circular, really fluid movements for the spine. And so if it's really clunky for you and feels really weird, just go really slow, right? Try to pretend like there's a pencil on your tailbone and that you're just tracing circles behind you. And then make sure you're always finding the pinky toe side of your back feet pressing down, or you're going to feel it in your knees. If you're still feeling it in the knees, make sure your knees are hip distance, which is 2 of your fists between your knees. And so we're always just measuring our bodies out because your body is designed so intelligently. Perfect. And then here, right, after you've done your table a few times, right, do this every day for 5 minutes and your spine will completely change. It will totally shift. And so if you want to work on your dog pose here, there's a couple things that I really recommend. The first is to do your dog pose on your forearms. Now, if you come into dog pose on your forearms and your shoulders are feeling like they're still right above your elbows and you're feeling tension in your shoulders, rather than being able to pull your torso closer towards your thighs and having this equilateral triangle from your elbows up to your hips, then this is where I really encourage you to invest in a really good yoga chair. And so a yoga chair will allow you to find your hips and take the pressure out of your shoulders. This is my favorite chair to use. Super simple. You can get it on Amazon, but you can bring your body, your hips on the chair here. And then if you're too short, you can put blocks underneath your feet, right? And you can walk your hands forward. And what this does is it now takes the pressure off of your wrist. And so now you can enjoy dog pose without having any weight in your hands. And this is really how dog pose should be anyway. You shouldn't feel like you have a ton of weight in your hands or your shoulders. A dog pose is a pose that is from your hips. And again, if you feel like your chair is a little bit too big for you and you're a little bit too short for the chair, you can use blocks under your legs here. You can bring blocks underneath your hands. You can always build up the practice with blocks and build up your practice with props. And it's really the way to create a sustainable practice that isn't working in the musculature of the body, because your muscles only know what they know, right? And when we're seeking change in the body, right, you need to learn how to work in the structure of your body. So you can always use props underneath your limbs and bend your knees and lift your heels in your dog pose, and it'll take all the pressure out of the wrist. And then you can work on your three-legged dog here without pressure in the hands, three-legged dog here without pressure in the hands. And so there's so many ways to incorporate poses into the props into the practice so that you're not always having to feel like, you're limited by your circumstances. And so if you have hurt your wrists, if you do feel like your wrists are not able to come into table pose, that is an incredible way to be able to now access the pose. And then in other parts of the practice, right, if you're coming into a lunge, you can just really work on being in your hips rather than in your hands and using the blocks far away from your body so that you're not having to have all the weight and all the pressure in your hands. And so in both ways, however you get in and out of the pose, right, you don't always need to have all the weight in your hands. So the best thing I can recommend for those of you that are coming to me with tight wrists, with hands that are feeling a little bit stuck in table pose, is to really utilize the props. Learn how to find your hips, because the more you find your hips in the practice, the less you will need your hands. And so if you are looking for a series for utilizing props for getting into the structure of the body and repatterning the structure, then my longevity series is definitely for you. In these poses, we actually won't be putting too much weight on the hands. There's so many postures that you can do to repattern your hips, to repattern your pelvis, to really learn how to work in the structure of your body rather than the muscles, because the muscles, the denser they get, the harder they get, the more rigid they get, the harder it is to move. So when we can actually use this practice to restructure the bones of our body, the muscles can finally release and we'll feel a lot of openness in our body. And so these are what I use in my practice. I have been teaching yoga for 15 years, and the props are the one thing that has changed my body, that has changed my life, that has taken all of those pesky little tensions out of my body because it was merely misalignments. And so I hope this video was valuable to you. Definitely give it a try if you are feeling that you have issues in your hands and your wrists. And if you want to hop into my longevity series, I will pop the link below so you can join us inside of there and repattern the whole entire structure of your body, which really repatterns your life, which allows your muscles to work efficiently, intelligently, which will give you more energy for the things that you really want to do rather than just trying to keep the body up misaligned. So I'll see you inside the longevity series.